Hey there everyone, this is Mystic Fish, and I thought I would do something a little different this time around. It's something that I have been working on for a little bit in terms of figuring out how to make it work. I think it's an interesting little oddity, and I figured I would write up what I had figured out here. So today we're going to talk about sushi belts. So that is the idea that I'm going to have a circular loop of belt, and all of the items are going to go onto this belt and come off of this belt. And all the items are going to be sort of mixed all together on here, just like a sushi belt in a restaurant. So, there's a number of different ways to go about doing this. If you have sort of a fixed number of items and they need to be sort of put on in relatively equal numbers, then there are schemes that let you do a bunch of like splitter work to sort of, mix everything together in specific ratios. And then the other sort of major idea, and this is the one that we're going to be looking at here, is the idea of a sort of a memory cell. So the idea is that we pick a specific number of a particular item that we want on the belt, and then the idea is that we keep track both of how many we want on there and how many we currently have on there. And so the idea is that whenever I put an item on the belt, I increase the count, and whenever I take an item off the belt, I decrease the count. And to decide whether I'm allowed to put one on here, I just need to see, do I have fewer items on here than what I'm really looking for? And so that's a tricky thing, though, is trying to figure out what is the right number to put on here. And so I had the idea to try to figure out if I could design with some circuit network work here, a way that this could be sort of adaptive and kind of set itself. And I think I've figured that out. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about how this works. Now, I'm gonna take as inspiration here actually one of the protocols that drives a lot of traffic on the internet, which is TCP. And in particular, TCP, which actually is the underlying protocol for a lot of web traffic, right? HTTP, which you might recognize from URLs, runs on top of TCP. But TCP has an algorithm called Congestion Control, and the idea is that as I'm trying to transmit data through a network, if I encounter slowness, I'm going to interpret that as congestion, meaning like, hey, I'm actually sending too much traffic, and then adapt how much I'm sending in real time. So we're going to do something similar here with the items on the belt. And this uses an algorithm called additive increase multiplicative decrease, or AIMD. And the rough idea here is that over some period of time, if I haven't encountered congestion, then I'm going to increase the number of items on the belt. But if it seems like I have too many of that item, I'm going to actually back off multiplicatively, meaning that I'm going to actually make it be a fraction of what it was before. And so we'll get into more details around this. But the basic idea that we're going to start with is we're going to pick a spot on our belt, which is going to be we'll call it the end of the sushi loop. So the idea is that the raw materials, or the first initial items, come in after that square on the belt, and all of the ins and outs and whatever all happen before we get here. And so what we're going to set this for is we're actually going to read the belt contents, and we're going to leave it on pulse. So that means it's basically just going to count everything that it sees that comes under this sensor here. Now, the way that a lot of these adaptive protocols work is they work on a particular cycle. So they only adapt every so often. And we are going to use a fish kind of as our clock. So the idea is I'm going to put a fish on there. I'm not really going to use it in any recipes. And if we look here, might be hard to see, but every time the fish comes under the sensor, we get a quick blip over here. And so we'll use this as our way of adjusting the demand for different items. And so we're going to leave the demand the same until the fish comes around, and at that point, we'll either increase the demand by 1, or we'll back it off by some multiplicative factor. So that's what we're going to do here. Now, one of the things that we need to figure out is, okay, what does congestion look like? So in my mind, and this is actually a big problem with these types of sushi belts, is that they can get clogged with the wrong item, and then you can't actually even put on, there's not enough room to put new items on. And so, so congestion is sort of a big thing we want to avoid here. And so one of the things that we want to figure out is, okay, well, how do we know if we have too much of something? And I'm going to say we have too much of something if like extra amount of it comes back around and actually makes it under the sensor. Okay, so all right, so now let's start working through some things here. So so the first thing we're going to do is we want to get a clean fish signal. So we're going to say if I can see at least one fish on the belt, then I'm going to specifically just say, give me one fish. And so, so this does a couple things. One, for some reason there's extra fish on here. It still just makes one for one fish. We're going to be multiplying things by one. This one later, and so we don't want to accidentally multiply by 2, for example. But then also this gets a clean signal. So even though there may be multiple things on the belt, right, and we would see them all show up here, the only thing that we're going to get through is really the fish here for this. Okay. Next, what we're going to do is we are going to get another combinator, and this one though is going to say if I have anything, then so any item, I'm going to output one of that item, and then the last thing that we're going to do is and that's again just to make sure that, hey, as long as there's not too many of these, we might have like 2 pieces of iron ore that show up at the same time. So again, we only want to record really the one piece of information, which is that like, hey, I've got too much iron ore. Okay. And then we're going to connect these both together here. And now here's the fun part. So we're going to say for anything, if it is greater than fish, we're going to output that thing. Okay, so what the heck does this mean? Okay, now most of the time, right, fish is 0, right? There's 0 coming out here. So in some ways, and sorry, then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to loop this around. Okay, so this is sort of a modified Sr Latch. If you go look in the Factorio wiki under the sort of circuit network tutorials or cookbooks, you may find something here. And so this is something that sort of remembers what it's seen. And so the idea is, let's say I've got a piece of iron ore that comes under the sensor. Okay, that's going to come in here. Actually, we need to make sure that we have connected this here. So that's going to come in here. I'm going to have iron ore is greater than 0 because there's going to be 1. I'm going to output an iron ore. Okay. Then it's going to come in here. The iron ore will be 1. Most of the time the fish will be 0. And so I'll keep the iron ore. But then that one iron ore is going to loop back around, and I'm going to remember that I've seen an iron ore until a fish comes around, because at that point, then our 1 iron ore is not greater than our 1 fish, and so it will clear it out. And so what this does is it lets us remember what items have we seen since the last time the fish came around. Okay, so right now there's nothing. So let's see. Let's stick an iron ore on there, and we'll watch for the output signals over here. So still nothing there, but the first time the iron ore comes through, you can see that it's remembering that I saw an iron ore until the fish comes around, and then it clears it again. Okay, so so another way of thinking about this is going to capture our congestion for us. So this is going to say, what is the extra stuff we've seen, sort of this orbit of the fish. Okay, so that's the first thing. So that's important. We've got an indicator of our congestion. Okay, let's get a couple more of these set up. Okay, now the next thing that we need is we want to know what the current demand is. So how many of the items are we actually trying to add? Because that's actually the thing that we're going to be adapting here. So for that, what we're going to do, we're going to have another feedback loop here, and we're going to say anything that's less than 0, we're going to retain it. Okay, so we're going to loop that back around. So this will just remember stuff unless it is otherwise modified on the input, right? And so we can, if we see this, well, let's see, that's not going to work because I have +1 fish, but we'll see here. And so I'm going to represent demand as negative numbers. That means because if I keep a count of everything as a positive number, and then the demand is a negative number, then I can add them together, and the difference is going to be sort of how many we're missing or how many extra we have. So that's why we're doing less than 0 here. Okay, so that's going to remember everything. Okay, so now the question is, all right, what do we want to keep track of? And so for this, what we want is we want a base demand. So let's start with iron ore. And we're going to give it a base demand of -1. So the idea is that this constant combinator, we're going to set to -1 everything that we're going to try to sort of calculate a demand for. So we'll start just with iron ore here. So let's start with the default sort of case, right? Which is that this additive increase. So every time the fish comes around, if we have not sort of seen too much of the iron ore, then we want to add to 1 the number of iron ore we want to see on there. And so we are going to do that with some decider combinators. Okay. So the first thing that we're going to do is, remember, this one is tracking our congestion. So we're going to say if we've seen congestion for iron ore, then I'm going to output a C for congestion. Okay? It's going to end up that that due to the way this is going to work, I'm actually going to need a row. We're going to set up a row of combinators. We have to split it out because you can't sort of do the math, or I couldn't figure out a way to do the math sort of all combined together, right? Like this is nice because this will track all of the products, that end up with congestion all in one combinator, right? Because you get the parallelism of all the different signals. Okay, so now the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to say if C is less than 1, okay, so that means we do not have congestion. Then what I want to do is I want to add in whatever the default thing is coming in from here, right? So I'm going to say just output the iron ore from here, right? So that's going to say if I do not have congestion, then I should be here, and let's connect this here. The input signal is, I think that's not the signal one. I actually want the constant one. Okay. All right, so as you can see, we're saying we have not seen any congestion. And so in this case, C is 0, right? Which means that you don't see it on the output signal. And so in this case, we're basically just allowing the default extra demand, the -1, to come through here. Okay? And then what we're going to do is we're going to come back around. This is our fish signal. And what we're going to do is we're going to swing this around. Actually, I want an arithmetic combinator. Okay, so this is going to be the thing that adjusts stuff. Okay, and so we're going to say whatever comes in here, multiply it by fish. And I'll explain this in a minute. Okay, so this is basically while the fish is out in the middle, like right now, whatever comes in is going to get turned off, right? Because fish is 0, so it basically is going to multiply everything by 0 and it's going to clear it out, and there will be no output signal here. But when the fish is 1, whatever is coming in on this side will get passed through here. And so this is how we're going to update our demand here, okay? So whatever we tell it, whatever adjustment we tell it to make, whenever the fish comes through, it's going to pulse the signal through one time, and it's going to update the demand. Okay, so let's give this a shot here. All right, remember, we've got the one coming out, but nothing's getting through yet until we get a fish, all right? And that will flash the fish, and it should flash the fish. Oh, because I didn't connect the fish signal. Here we go, fish signal. Okay, so now we'll wait for this fish to come around, and that should take the -1 that we currently see and propagate it through. Okay, so now, now my output signal is -1. So now I want to say, hey, I want to have 1 piece of iron ore. And when it comes back around again, we're going to say, now I want 2 pieces of iron ore, right? And then as we keep going, it's going to keep counting up, okay? So that's the additive increase, okay? So as long as we don't see congestion, we're just going to keep increasing. And the idea is that this is kind of going to probe, right? It's going to say like, well, I'm going to send more until I see a problem. And then we're going to try to back off. Okay, so we'll get into that next. Okay, so we want to do a multiplicative back off. Okay, so if we decide that we want to back off, what we're going to do is it's going to depend on what the current amount is, right? So here it's -6, so or 6, if you will, it's a demand of 6. And so I want to back off by some constant fraction of whatever it currently is, okay? And one way we can do that with bit arithmetic is we can say, okay, whatever the current demand is for everything, I can right bitwise shift it. So I'm not going to get into the integer arithmetic, but you can think of this somewhat as right shift is division, and this is how many powers of 2. So if I right shift by 1, that's dividing it in half. I'm actually going to do 2. So this is going to say divide it in quarter, or get a quarter of what it is. And so as we see here, we've got -11 coming in. Oh, I need to say the output. And so we've got -11 coming in, and you can see the output signal is about a quarter. So we can probably watch this as it rolls around, somewhere between -13 and -16. It should roll over to -4. Yeah, there it goes. Okay. And the idea is that when I back off, I'm backing off faster than I'm increasing. And so that's what really helps you stabilize things over time, right? That's the idea of the additive increase, multiplicative decrease. Now in this case, I'm saying like, okay, a quarter of it is 4, but I actually want to remove that amount of demand. So I actually, since demand is negative numbers, I need this as a positive number. So I'm going to come over here and say whatever comes through here, multiply it by -1. Okay, and then we're going to output the same thing. Okay, so now here I've got my output signal -5, and that's going to turn it into a +5. Okay, now we need one more combinator. For this, we're going to say, give me the congestion signal, which we can grab from here. Give me the amount that I would back off if I'm going to back off. And the idea is going to be if I have congestion, then I'm going to output the back off amount of iron ore. Okay, right? The back off amount here is currently 6. And so if there's congestion, I'm going to add 6. Which reduces the demand by 6. And then I'm going to feed this back into the multiply by fish, so it only gets updated. So between these two combinators, right, C is only ever 0 or 1. Okay, so if C is 0, then there's no congestion, and we add in our base demand. If C is 1, which would be here, then we add in the back off amount. Okay? So we should still have been counting up here. And so now let's go ahead and add some congestion here. So we'll put, let's see. I'm going to put this right after right here. Okay, so we just created congestion, right? I can see the one there. That means the back off amount is coming through, should be coming through. Although it looks like it's not. Input signal's 8. Did I already clear it? No, I've got congestion. Oh, I didn't connect the C signal from here. Okay, I need to do that. Okay, now I'm outputting the 7, that's the back off. And if we watch, when the fish comes back around, we should see the demand shrink by, yeah, maybe 4 or something, right? So, so I'm going to pick up the iron ore again. It should probably decrease one more time because we had a congestion there, right? It decreased by 4 because that was about 1/4 of what we saw. And then after this, the fish is going to start. Oh, we did one more, I guess. Do we still have? Nope, we no longer have congestion because I picked it up after the sensor. And now we should start picking up. Okay, that's not counting the right way. Why is that not counting the right way? That's going the wrong way. Okay. Oh, I see why this is going the wrong way. It's because this signal is getting caught with these guys. So we're going to do this so it doesn't bleed back into this guy. Okay, now this should hopefully start counting in the right direction. Okay, now it's counting up again. Okay, so now we've got it, right? So as long as we're not seeing congestion, the demand is going to increase or get more negative. And then if we do have congestion like that, then it's going to back off, right? So it's going to reduce by more than 1. And that's the whole point, right? It backs off faster than it increases. Okay, so then this is it, right? So this is going to represent our current demand is going to be on this combinator. And so what we'll do is we can get one more arithmetic calculator or a combinator. We can take the output of here. We can say, what do you have? Just output itself, and then from there we will, and that just cleans up the signal and puts it on allows us to change from a green to a red, and I'll explain why we're going to use the red here. Okay, so hopefully you're all with me, and so if we want to add tracking of more materials, what we do is we add a base signal here of -1 for that material. And then we need to add a row for these 3 combinators, right? So, for example, if I also wanted to track coal, I would put a -1 here. And then I would copy these guys here. Move these over, and I would switch these. So instead of talking about iron ore, they're going to talk about coal. Okay. Then we need the current congestion coming into the C combinator. Then we need the current base demand coming into this one. And then we need the current sort of back off amount into this one. And then from here, if we feed this all, both of these go into this multiply by fish thing, so that it only updates. And so that's it. We can add as many materials as we want, and we just need to add these three things here. And so if we look now, we're counting up on both coal and iron ore. Okay, and just to show you. If I drop this on there to make congestion, you can see that we can have them move independently, right? So so we're backing off on the iron ore and should be increasing on the coal, although the coal seems to not be increasing. So we need to debug this a second. So that's coming in here. I think I'm getting these. I think these are getting confused here. I think I got the wires crossed here. Okay. Okay, so that needs the congestion. No, the congestion should not be going there. This is a problem. Okay. All right, let's rewire this. All right, we'll do it from scratch. All right, first we need to know, am I seeing congestion? And so for that, I can go from the congestion to here. And I'm going to say, if I have congestion on iron ore, I'm going to output a C of 1. Okay, next, I'm going to get the C from here into here. So that will only ever have a C. And then I'm going to connect my base demand to here. And so I'm going to say if C is less than 1, then pass through the iron ore. Okay? And so that has the iron ore and the C, so that's good. And then from here, this is going to go into the multiply by fish. Yes. And then we're going to go, okay. I'm going to get a, here's where I need a different thing. So actually what I want is to do this. I'm going to bring the C's in with the red wires. That way that only ever has C's on them, and then I can bring that one into there. This is the back off amount into here, and then this goes back into the fish. Okay, and now let's see, are we counting up again on iron ore, hopefully? Yes, okay. Then we can, oh, I didn't finish putting this. Okay, if I do have congestion, so C greater than 0, then I'm going to output the back off amount of iron ore. Okay, so that's what I want there. And then I can change this to coal, and change this to coal, and change this to coal. Okay, and then we need the default demand into here. We need the back off amount into here. We need this into multiply by fish, and we need this into multiply by fish. And so now what we should see is we should hopefully see the coal and the iron ore counting up when the fish comes around. Yep. And then if we create some congestion for the iron ore, we should see the coal tick up and the iron ore tick down. Yep, which it did. Okay. All right, so that's how it's working. Okay, so what's next? Okay, so next, let's talk about memory cell sushi belts. Okay, so now we've got we're gonna hold that aside for a minute. Here we've got our sushi belt here, and so one of the things that I'm doing is I'm basically sticking a lane balancer at each corner just to make sure that I'm sort of balancing the sides of the belt that gets used here. Okay, so how does this work? So around the outside here, we have a circuit network with a green wire and a red wire. Okay, so the green wire is going to represent the current inventory of stuff on the belt. And the red wire is going to indicate the current demand. So we're eventually going to feed the red wire based on the stuff that we were just calculating over there. But I wanted to go through how this works over here first. Okay. So how do we remember what stuff is on the belt? Well, the first thing is that whenever something puts something on the belt, and so I'm going to use this to put coal and iron ore on here. So we'll do this. So here we're going to say for right now, just when anytime you pick something up, send a pulse of it. Okay. So this is eventually going to have iron ore in it. So every time I put an iron ore in here, and I'm going to just make sure we only do one at a time here for a second. I'm going to pulse 1. Okay, so that's going to put a 1 onto the green wire. But we need to remember that. And so that's, here, I'm going to take these off for a second. So that is where these arithmetic combinators come in. So basically it's going to say whatever you have, don't modify it, but just remember it. And so the trick is that whenever I see something, it's going to come in, so I count it. But I'm also going to feed it back around and remember it and put it back on the whoops. Okay, so every time I pull something onto here, I'm now going to remember it, right? Because the signal will come around, it will get added to whatever else was in there because there's a feedback loop. And then basically it's just going to stick it back on the output. So every time I pull something onto the belt, I'm going to add 1. And then the second thing I'm going to do is whenever I take something off the belt, and we'll use this other network here for this. All right, so here's an inserter that takes things off the belt. And so same deal. I'm going to say, in this case, I have this set. I have to specifically say, hey, only iron ore or coal in here, so that this makes iron plates. Otherwise, this, if this was a regular inserter, it would make, who knows what. If it picked up an iron plate, this would start making steel, etc. Okay, so now this one's going to pulse something, a count of 1 every time it pulls something off. And so that we're going to use this inner red network here for that. And then since pulling something off is actually decreasing stuff, what we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, whatever you see here coming in on this, take things off network, multiply it by -1. And then, so we'll go from this network into here, we'll multiply it by -1. And then we will stick it back on there, okay? So now the green wire is accurately, every time I put something on, +1, everything I take something off, -1. So that keeps an accurate count of what's on there. Now the other thing is, remember we said the red wire is going to be the demand, which we're going to represent as a negative number. And so the other thing we're going to do is for everything that puts something on a belt, we are also going to connect it to the demand network, okay? So now we're going to enable disable. In this case, this is going to be the iron ore. And so we're going to say if the aggregate iron ore is less than 0, you can put stuff on there. And then when you do, you're going to pulse the iron ore that you put on there so we can keep track of it. Okay, so how does this work? So if I have one thing on the belt, but I have a demand of 2, which we're going to represent as -2. Both of those signals come in here, and I end up with -1, right? Because I'm short one piece of material, and so if the material is less than 0, it means that I'm short, and I can put things on. And that's pretty much it. So whenever we put something on, we make sure we connect it to both the green and the red networks. We say, in this case, if there is a demand for coal, and I'm going to override the stack size here, then you can operate. And when you do put something on, let us know you put something on so we can keep track of the count. Okay? This one, the ones that take things off the belt, they just have to say -1. They can always take things off the belt. Okay? And then we'll just do one more, and then we'll just show everybody how this works. Okay, so same deal. If we are short on iron plates, then go ahead and otherwise give us the give us what you want. Okay, so now let's say that I want to have 1 iron plate on the belt. Okay, so now it should be the case that here, this is disabled by control behaviors. So, because I didn't connect these guys. All right, so we're gonna have this be our constant demand here. Okay, so this one is currently enabled, right? Because I've got, if we take a look what's on the signal here, I've got 0 of these on the belt, and I want -1. Okay, so that's currently enabled. These are disabled, right? Because I currently have no demand for them. Okay, so let's watch what happens if we put a -1 coal and a -1 iron ore on here. So these are enabled now, right? But we actually have to stick some stuff in here. This will be, I think, the iron ore. This is the iron ore, so we'll go put some iron ore in there. This will be the coal. Nope, wrong guy. Wrong guy. Unfortunately, we can fix stuff like this by, let's see. First, let's turn off the demand. You may be not at all surprised to learn that I had to do a fair amount of debugging on this stuff. Let us get rid of that and do undo. That'll clear the current count of stuff. All right, before I mess this up again, let's go ahead and put coal in. Okay, so now we've got the right things. Let's re-engage the demand. The demand is currently 1, right? So as long as there's 1 on, it won't put another one on. But as soon as I take one off, it'll put a new one in, right? So we can see that working there. We have now we've put one iron plate on there, and we can see here, I've got a green 1 and a red -1, right? So I have met my demand, so it's not putting any more on there. And so that's basically it. So if we put together this loop for maintaining the demand, right? So that is going to take the place of this thing. So we'll do it dynamically instead of setting it specifically. Then this stuff like actually adapts itself. So here is a version that I put together that just does sort of approximately 45 signs per minute. So if we look at the factory planner, right, 45 red signs per minute. I need 1 gear assembler, probably 8 red science assemblers, 3 copper smelters, 5 iron smelters, and then we have to put the raw materials in. And so I've actually been letting this run, and so as you can see, this is the extra rows of for all the materials that I mentioned over here. But everything else works exactly the way that we were saying before. So there is a fish on here. Here it is. Here's the fish coming through. And so this is adapting. And so as you can see, these things grow and shrink just as we said here. So now we've got extra iron ore. And so iron ore is currently at demand of -6. So the next time the fish comes through, where's the fish? Here's the fish. Next time the fish comes through, instead of -6, we should see that drop. So here comes the fish up to the sensor. It's at -6. I'd expect this to be like -4 or something like that when it gets through. Yep. So now we have -4 demand for iron ore, right? So it backs right off. Now, an interesting thing about this is you may notice the demand here of -10,000 red science. And because I am counting and taking all the red science off, we never see congestion for red science. And so in general, I think that what we will see is there's always going to be one bottleneck in the system. Something is going to be the slowest. And whatever that is, the demand for it should just continue increasing through the roof. And so this is an interesting sort of also diagnostic tool, because in addition to being able to sort of adjust, and it doesn't matter how long this circuit is, right, or how many belts I have. I didn't have to calculate, even though I did include a certain number of all of these sorts of things. It's actually, I could actually even add an additional set of gears, and it would still adapt itself. Like, it still would not make too many gears, and that's kind of the cool thing. So let's see. If I am taking things off, that goes on to the take things off network, and you are just going to read the hand contents. Then the putting things on one connects red and green. And then for this, we're going to say you're enabled if green, or if we don't have enough gears, and we're going to read the hand contents. And then I can change this to a gear, and this should work. It will probably ignore it because we are not generating. Eventually what we'll find is that, we're going to keep adding to the number of iron plates, because in this case, now we've got something else that's grabbing more iron plates than before. But you can see it can't stick the gears out, right? Because there's already enough gears on the belt. So like that, so that's the cool thing, right? It's completely adaptive. So if we actually take a look, so I've been letting this run for a long time. One of the things that we see a little better here. So one of the things we see with the production rates is that it slowly climbs, and then it hits congestion, and then it backs off, right? And then it starts climbing again. And that's the way the adaptation works. And you can see like all of them have this kind of zigzag pattern to it. But, if we look at things over a long time scale, like over an hour, we can see that like it's actually, pretty steady over time. Now we were shooting for 45 science per minute. We're only getting 36, right? And that's what is that? That's about like 80% or something of the total, and that's because we lose a little something, right? Because we back off by a quarter, right? We drop to 75%. Like, as soon as we see congestion, the reality is like we're not actually operating at 100% at any period of time. And that's just the overhead that we need for this sort of adaptation to work here. So there's a little bit of inefficiency, but the trade-off is, well, I don't have to manage it or set any of this stuff. As long as now at this point, as long as I can duplicate these, right? And there's no calculations to these, right? These are literally the same, except I'm just changing the signal to match whatever the material is on these. And then I have to wire them back into the rest of this stuff. I'm no longer calculating demand. I do not have to calculate the counts because that's happening automatically. All I have to do is what you just saw me do here with this gear machine. I have to wire in the inserters that are taking things off and the ones that are putting things back onto the belt. And you can kind of tell this is working by sort of like looking at this section of the belt over here, right? So because not very much stuff is getting through here in general, right? Like some parts of the belt are much more crowded, like this stuff up here, right? Like we're actually doing a reasonable job of putting exactly the amount on that gets used by the time it gets around. So that's all working pretty well. So I'm pretty excited about this. I did a little searching. I didn't necessarily find any prior posts where somebody had described doing this. So I figured I would go ahead and put this together as a video. I may also write it up at some point, but I'll put a couple of references into a comment on this video. Let me know what you think. I'm curious if you like these types of posts here. I mean, this is obviously not a playthrough, but I think it's an interesting little mechanism here, especially if you like sushi belts. I'm half inclined at some point to really put this to the test and see how maintainable is this really, and can I actually manage to do things with like one giant sushi belt? And so I'm a little curious about like how well that will work. But let me know if that's something that you'd be interested in seeing. Stick that in the comments, and otherwise we're gonna end and wrap this up here. This has been Adaptive Sushi Belt Factorio for you. I hope you liked it. So we'll see you next time, and until then, bye.